Hello. Python. What a great language, right? It's arguably one of the best languages to know right now. But if there is any other language that's maybe just as important, it's probably JavaScript. Now, I know some of you may be thinking, but Jake, neither of those languages are as good as C. None of them are as fast as C. And also Java's super popular. Or what about all these new languages? And sure, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of good languages out there. But I would still say that if you're trying to find a job in tech, JavaScript and Python have arguably the most number of jobs available for them. So, again, kind of good languages to know. So, do you already know Python? Or at least have a pretty good idea of how it works? If not, check out this series I have right up here, where I go over how to do basically everything in Python. Now, if you did watch that series or you already know Python, let's learn JavaScript from Python. So let's start off with how do you run JavaScript? Because for Python, we just use the Python command within the command line. But for JavaScript, we actually have a couple of options. The first option is to use HTML. JavaScript primarily used to be used on websites. Now it's kind of everywhere. It's infected everything. But in this case, we can just kind of write JavaScript in an HTML file. So just like this right here, this is totally valid. Now, how do we use this? Well, we just open up an HTML file and you open up the console by right-clicking and clicking inspect. And this is the HTML file, this test.html. And here we go. Here's our JavaScript. So if we go and change this to say hello world or hello YouTube, and then I go back here and I just refresh the page by pressing F5 or clicking this. Bam. Hello, YouTube. Pretty cool. Now that's awesome, but you probably don't want to be just having these random HTML files around when you really want to write JavaScript files. So JavaScript files end with a .js. So instead, you can create a .js file, just like this one we have here, and you can run it using something called Node. Node can kind of be thought of as basically like Python, or like the Python command. It's a command line program that allows you to execute JavaScript. Node is kind of what, at least as far as I know, what popularized using JavaScript for servers and kind of a little bit of the blow up of JavaScript's popularity, outside of web stuff at least. So I'm gonna leave a link in the description to go ahead and install Node. It's kind of just a link to their website. So if you want to follow along, go ahead and do that. And as always, the code for all of this will be in a link to my GitHub in the description as well for free. So if you want to kind of check it out and play with it, you can. So for this, we're going to use Node because it's more similar to Python. So coming from Python and knowing Python, Node is probably the closest you can get. All right, so I have two files open here that are kind of trying to do the same thing. But really, it's just kind of comparing how you can do something in one language versus another language. So let's do it. All right, first things first here, on the left side here, we have comments. We have the Python file. If you are familiar with Python, which I'd assume you are if you're watching this video, then this is the Python file and things probably look normal here. Now, on the right side, we have our JavaScript file. Now, so we're going to kind of go through each of these things, and I'm going to just explain them to you. So, okay, what do we have here? The first things first is comments. You might not think that's that important, but if you're reading somebody else's code, pretty important. So here we go. Comments, as you know, within Java or within Python, use the little hashtag or pound symbol. If you're a millennial or older, you know what a pound symbol is, probably, maybe, I don't know. So that's a comment in Python. In JavaScript, you can do, which is kind of more similar to most other languages, this // this is a single line comment. And for multi-line comments, you can do this / star. And that basically means that it's whatever is in here is going to be considered a comment until it finds another * /. So you could write code in here like whatever, hi, and this isn't going to execute because it's part of the comment. So kind of cool. I really prefer the JavaScript way of comments because it's way nicer. Because you can just write a bunch of comments if you need to, and you don't have to worry about like, where's the pound symbol? Or yeah, I see I'm old now, don't I? By the way, I'm not saying I'm old. But anyways, nobody's old. Let's continue. Variables. So pretty important part of programming, right? A variable, declaring a variable. How do we do that in Python? Python, we can say name equals Sammy. This is a string. We can say age equals 5. This is age is now a variable with an integer value. And we can say animal equals dog. And dog could be, well, in this case, it's just a string. But, it could be anything, right? Basically, what I'm saying here is that you can just declare variables by setting them to whatever you want, right? At any point, you can set them. And they're also not typed. Well, lucky for us, JavaScript also doesn't have typed variables because typed variables are very good sometimes. But when you're kind of just writing quick scripting things, so using scripting languages, you don't really need them because, well, you just don't really need them. All right, so variables, excuse me. All right, variables within JavaScript. So here we go. We have const name. Now this is basically the same thing as name over here. The main difference being that we are defining it using const. So variables within JavaScript have to have this prefix of either const, let, or var. I probably should have put var here, not vart. Sounds nasty. Const here. So const basically means that this name variable cannot change. So it's constant. That's what const stands for. So that means that if we try and reset this name variable later below, it will throw an error because it says you're trying to change a constant value. So this is really, really great. It's not something you really have within Python, at least to my knowledge. Maybe there's some package you can do, and you can kind of make it that the case, I think, using like classes and stuff like that if you really want to. But this is nice that you can just kind of const whatever and you're good to go. Now, there's also let and var. Let and var, for right now, we're going to say they're the exact same. Basically, these are declaring variables that allows you to just kind of, again, nothing's typed here. So now age is set to 5 and animal is set to dog. But they're kind of the same thing. They can be changed. So they are not immutable. They are mutable values. So pretty cool. Moving on, printing. How do you print stuff? Because printing stuff, pretty important. You're trying to debug something, throw in a bunch of print statements. You kind of go until you can't see the next print statement. That's probably where your error is between the two. Pro tip. Python, print. Just print, right? Pretty simple. JavaScript, console.log is how we print things. That is the way to do it. So there are, of course, like different logging frameworks you can use, but console.log is the default thing. It's the synonymous version of print. So awesome. Let's move on. If statements. So if within Python is interesting, right? Like here it's just if name is Sammy, so the string Sammy, then we have our colon, and then we have a block, so we have an indentation, and then we have print, whatever the name is. Now, we also have is here. You could also do equals. That's like still valid within Python, but is also accepted. Is not a thing in JavaScript. So in this case, we have, don't worry about this name deprecation stuff. That's just, don't worry about that. So here we have if name. Now you're going to notice that we have these parentheses that's kind of covering this. This is basically how it works in most other languages. You need a parentheses to kind of encompass what you want your conditional of your if statement or your statement to be. So in this case, we could have multiple things. I guess I should also say that if you wanted to say like and age is 5, we can't use the and keyword or keyword. We have to do and. You do 2 ampersands as and. So then we could say and age equals 5. And then if you wanted to do or, you do 2, the key, I guess, shift backspace or not backspace, the one below the backspace, backslash key. These little guys, these lines, and this means or. Again, this is the case in almost every other language. So if you're coming from Python, where you have more of this like really simple, if name is Sammy and age is 5, like that's really readable, right? It makes a lot of sense. But if you're using JavaScript or again, almost any other language, this is how it's going to look. This is just kind of how programming languages usually do things. So it's a good thing to kind of get used to if you want to try new things with new programming languages. It's a great gateway language, I guess, especially from Python. All right, cool. So here, if name is Sammy or equals Sammy and age equals 5, so that's equivalent to this or. Cool. And then in this case, technically we don't need this here. This is also valid, but it's kind of good practice to do these little curly braces, and these curly braces denote a block. So unlike Python, where everything needs to be indented properly, you don't need to do that with JavaScript. So you could basically write an entire program in a single line if you wanted to. Like this is valid as well. You could also just do this, also valid. But typically I would do something like this because this is going to be the most readable, so that people kind of understand like, okay, if line, whatever is after this and before this is in the if statement. So it's very easy to understand, and kind of more simple to understand where the block ends. Unlike within Python, where if I've actually seen some issues before where the indentation was just wrong on something and it like caused very annoying issues. Doesn't happen that often, but it's harder to have happen when you have braces. All right, functions. Okay, so to define a function within Python, we just do def, so it's a definition of a function, and we have x here. So in this case, it's the same kind of thing as like an if statement where it's blocked, and we print the x. And this is how you would call the function, just func, and then 15 or 15, 15. I don't know why I'm illiterate. And then here we have the same thing, a function, but here we can define it with function func x, and then again we have the brace. So the braces are, again, I don't think really required for a single line function, but if they're multi-line, you would definitely want them, but you probably should always just use them because it's way nicer to read. So in this case, you can probably see how these two things work here. And we will go over other types of functions because there are multiple within JavaScript. But we'll do that shortly. Next are classes. So a class. In this case, we define a class with class test : and then again, we define this init function. And this is going to be called basically when we create our class here. So test equals test55. And then that will then set 5 to x and 5 to y. And if we don't set this here, then it will set y to be 10 as default. Now that's pretty similar to what we have in JavaScript. Within JavaScript, you can do class test, and it's kind of like it's a function almost. It's just you don't have the parentheses here or the parameters. And then there's something called a constructor, which allows you to, it's basically the def init, but constructor is basically how you can define a function here. Now, I guess one thing I didn't mention is that like if you wanted to have another function within your class here, you could do like cool or cool, right? And then you could do self and then like print self.x, right? If we wanted to do something similar within JavaScript, you would actually just do cool, and you don't need to actually pass anything here because it uses the this keyword. So classes use this, and this is always available within an object. So this refers to the class itself, so this entire object. And anytime you set this, like dot whatever, so dot x to something, it's available within the class at all times, okay? So kind of similar to how self is available here, but if like you can't do this, right? This would fail. So just something to be mindful of. So in this case, we would just do console.log this.x. And that is kind of the equivalent thing we would do here. Sweet. Another thing to be mindful of here is that when we are creating our class or initializing our class, we have to use the new keyword. So new is again also common in a lot of other languages, but new is basically just saying I'm creating a new object. Otherwise, if you did like this, well, first off, it would throw an error. And if you did this, it would point to the class. So it would be a reference to the class, which is not what we want. So yeah, pretty cool. Anyways, I'm not going to really run it. I have all these console.logs through here. I'm not going to run these because I don't think they're that important, but they're here that if you want to download the code and try it yourself, then you can kind of see all the output. So cool. Awesome. So if we did print out things here, you would see, whatever. Let me just do it. I just said that, but all right. So here we go. We've printed this stuff out. What did I do here? Oh, sorry, I haven't an is here, but they prefer the there we go. Okay, so here we got these are the lines here. Where is it? Here. Okay, so here we go, the same lines. In this case, we have test, and it looks basically like similar to like a dictionary, but this is what objects look like, specifically classes within JavaScript. It's basically a named object, which is what this is here. And then on this side, we have this main test object, and then it's kind of pointing to a memory address, which is not as readable, not really as nice. You can create like a toString function for the class if you want, and it will be way nicer, but yeah. And then in this case, if you do the type of it, it will say that it is a class and it is the type of test, which you're kind of getting here. And then within JavaScript, it just says that it's an object. So everything in JavaScript that's not just a variable of like a number or something like that is an object, which can be good or not good, I guess, depending on what you like. Okay, onward. Let's look at arrays or lists. Okay, so we have an array here, and we are saying array or a list in Python equals square bracket, and then 1, 2, 3 within it. And then we can do a for loop over this, doing for x in array, print x, right? That's going to print 1, 2, 3, which we see right here. In JavaScript, we can do the same thing. Basically, it's the exact same thing, but remember, for a variable, you need to have a lit or a const or a var in front. And again, we'll go over that shortly. But then in this, we can do for lit x in array, almost the exact same, except we need the parentheses. And then we can console.log. So again, just how we're printing it, it's kind of, hopefully this is kind of making a lot of sense. You can kind of assume how some things are going to work now. All right, dictionaries. So dictionaries in JavaScript are kind of just called objects. So I said everything's an object. So still dictionaries are. In this case, we can define this object here, and we can say that this string of text equals this string of cool, string of 23 equals this string of nice. In JavaScript, we can actually just do lit object equals, and then these curly braces. And then you can just define things basically almost like JSON. So if you know what JavaScript, well, JSON stands for JavaScript object notation. And that's actually used like widely throughout the internet, basically to transfer data representations of objects back and forth. And it looks something like this. It actually looks a little closer, ironically, to the Python version because they're always a string is the key, but this is kind of how it looks. So yeah, and in this case, we just do object.test, and that will go ahead and print that, and that's why we see what it was test cool. That's where we see the cool from, and I got our cool nice here. All right, so I'm not actually printing anything here because we don't really do anything for this, but I'm from the Python side, but I'm just kind of sharing it on the JavaScript side because I think they're kind of interesting things that are unique to the language coming from Python. So variable scoping, we don't really have anything like that in Python. So what does that mean within JavaScript? So let's look at this here. So this is basically where the difference between var and lit come in. So for var scoping, we have we define this var x equals 1, and then if true, so it's always true, then var x equals 2, we console.log x, and then in this case, in Python, if you did this, no matter what, right, we'd always be referencing this x. But in JavaScript, depending on how you define your variable, whether it's a var or a let, it will basically say how it's allowed to be referenced. So in this case with var, it is basically more similar to how it works in Python. So if you redefine var here, which is kind of the same thing as just doing x equals in Python, then you're actually referencing this x. So that's why this will print out 2, and this will also print out 2. Now, for let, if you define a variable with let, it's scoped to the block that it's in. So that means that basically here, I realize it's not really highlighting there, basically everything but this is scoped to this let x equals 1. But then within this block, we also have another let x equals. So this variable is only scoped to within this if statement. That means, and what I mean by scoped is that you basically can only access this version of this x variable within this. So if I set let x equals 2, then I console.log this, but after this, even though this code has run after this let x equals 1, x outside of this block is still equal to 1 because we created a new version of x within this block using let, and there we go. This is something that will trip people up a lot who are coming from a lot of languages actually, because this isn't that common in languages. I just use let basically all the time. I think it's just simpler, but feel free to kind of do whatever you want. Another thing you might notice is that these here, we have these semicolons. So a semicolon in JavaScript is not required, but it can be used to basically finish a line. So what that means is that's kind of how you could literally write all of your code in a single line, because it finishes whatever you want here. So this could be written as if true var x equals 2 console.log x, and then console.log x. This is basically the exact same as what I had before. I can get rid of this. This is the exact same. It's really not readable, right? But it's there. Now, you might wonder okay, but why do we even have these if you're not going to write it like that, right? This is just to make it really clear to the reader, so people who are reading code and sometimes writing code, where this kind of statement has ended, right? So we know that this is done here, this is done here, this is done here. If you don't do it, it's possible that you add another line afterwards, or you delete a line for some reason, but you didn't have this, and then now we have an error, right? But if I add this semicolon in, we no longer have an error. So it's just kind of a case where it's just more concise. You don't need to do it. I don't do it in half the code in this file, but yeah, it's something that if you're coming from Python, it's a good thing to kind of get used to in other languages, because it's extremely common. Almost every other language will use semicolons and requires semicolons, but not some of the new ones. So I don't know, maybe it's kind of going away. Yeah, this is kind of where I was saying the semicolon is optional, so you can do this. I probably should have just scrolled down. Here I'm talking about a for loop. So a for loop, we've kind of gone over the for loop going over a list, but what if we want to go count from 1 to 50 or 0 to 50? In this case, in Python, we do for I in range 50, right? So this is going from 0 to 50. And then if I is 50, we're printing done. So for JavaScript, our for loop looks a little bit different. We actually have 3 different kind of clauses within our loop within JavaScript. So the first thing that actually happens here is we define what variable we want to use within this for loop. So it's only going to exist within this for loop. So in this case, we say let I equals 0. I is almost always used. It stands for index. So if you see it everywhere, that's why. But yeah. And then that's kind of it. That's this first clause. We're just saying, okay, we're creating a variable. We're going to set it to 0. We're going to continue on. The next thing is the statement that needs to be true for the for loop to continue. So this is kind of like a while loop. This part, you can kind of think of it. So we're saying for let I equal 0, while I is less than 50, continue this loop. You can almost think of it, I guess, like the start, the mid, like the during, and the end. So the start of this whole thing, we're setting lit I equals 0. Then, in order to see if we still want to make another loop, we're going to say, is I less than 50? Okay? And then the final thing is I++, which is going to add one value to I. So it's going to add 1 to I. And this happens when we finish running over one execution of the for loop. So we'll start at 0. We'll see if I is equal to 50. It's not. So we'll go down to here. We are finished. We then increment I by 1. So now I is equal to 1 because it starts at 0. And then we go over again, and we keep doing that until I is 50. And then we're saying, while I is less than 50. So in this case, this is never actually going to print. So if I said, if I is less than or equal to 50, then this would work. So I can prove that here. So now we got our done. So let's go over a couple of other unique things within JavaScript. So in this case, I'm going to talk about arrow functions versus normal functions. So I kind of talked that there are a couple of ways to create functions. So a function within JavaScript can be defined like this like multiply function where you define x and y as parameters and you return x times y. This kind of probably tracks with what you're kind of used to within Python, which is just this right here. Another way you can do this is actually by saying let a variable, so defining a variable equals, and then you're defining something called an arrow function. An arrow function basically lets you define a function using this little equals greater than sign to create an arrow. And then this is the function here, and you're defining it to a variable. And then you can execute that basically the exact same way, but as though it were a normal function. Pretty awesome. You can even do this in a single line, so you don't even need these squiggle braces if you don't want to. So pretty cool. Another thing that JavaScript has that's way more unique, I think, than Python and allows you to do some weird stuff sometimes is you can override stuff. And what I mean by overriding things is you can basically override anything you can access, which is, again, kind of bad in some cases. But in this case here, we're going to override console.log. So we're going to make it do something different. Maybe unexpected. So what we're doing here is we're saying console.log is nice. So just to kind of prove that, okay, we're getting nice. Then what we're doing is we're saying lit original clog, so console.log, equal console.log. Now what that's going to do is this is going to maintain a pointer to the function of console.log, the original function of console.log. So you could think it's like pointing here. And then we're going to set console.log equals this new function that takes in text, and then it's going to call original console.log. So now console.log, after this line, is pointing over here. So now when we call it, it's going to call this with some text, but then it's going to reference the original one. So that's kind of what's happening here. So we're defining this new function, and you might also notice this function does not have a name. That's right, you can have nameless functions within JavaScript. This is what is called an anonymous function. So arrow functions are also considered anonymous, and if it doesn't have a name, it's also just considered anonymous because it is nameless. So makes sense. Awesome, so there we go. So when we do this console.log here, we can see that it's overridden because we are calling test and then text. Pretty awesome. All right, so those are the major basics and the kind of the main differences between Python and JavaScript. But wait, what about arguably one of the most important things of Python? Pip. Packages, right? Getting packages. I wouldn't be able to make nearly as many cool videos on Python like this one here or this one here if I didn't have access to this stuff. So what do we have for JavaScript? Well, lucky for us, JavaScript also has a package manager called NPM. It stands for Node Package Manager. The website for this is right here, and it basically allows you to make some really cool stuff using Node. I've added a link in the description for how to install and kind of get started with NPM. It's actually very simple. You just kind of install Node and you click a checkbox. So, yeah. One thing that's a little bit unique about NPM is that you actually install packages for a given project. So that you usually don't install them globally so they're available kind of like pip does for your entire computer. You can, but you usually don't. So let me show you how to use NPM just real quick. All right, so I've opened up a new command prompt here. So let's show you how to use NPM within Windows. So we're going to do npm init. And when we run this, it's basically going to allow you to define what your npm package is. So that's what, when you do init, you're initializing a new package. Now, a new package can kind of also be thought of as a project. So what do we want our package name? We'll just call it Hi YouTube. What is the version? 1.0 sounds great. Subscribe. Entry point can be main.js, sure. Test command, we're not going to test stuff. Git repository, and we'll just say Jake. And then we're good to go. Is this okay? Yes. Now, that creates this package.json file. Let me get rid of this here. And that is this here. Now, what does this mean? Well, this is basically the definition of what your package is or your project is. Now, one thing that's kind of nice about this is that if we install a package, say something like requests, where we do npm, oh, sorry, I just remembered, I need to use it in here, where we do npm install save requests, then that's going to go ahead and grab this requests package and install it to our project or our package. But it will also add, because we added the -- save, a dependency. Now, this is actually almost the exact same thing as having a requirements.txt file for your Python package. So within Python, you can do pip install -r space requirements.txt, and it will basically try and find all of the pip packages from the requirements.txt file that is in your current directory and install them. Now, Node or NPM does the same thing, but theirs is actually just kind of encompassed within the definition of your package or project. So pretty neat. So that means that if you downloaded this on a new computer, you just have to do npm install within the same directory, and it would find your package.json file, and it would go ahead and see what the dependencies are and go ahead and install them. Pretty awesome. All right, so how do you actually use the packages? So in order to do that, you can do something like this. So in this case, we are using the requests package, and we're doing that by saying require requests. This is going to require the requests package. And if you'll actually notice that we also have this node modules. And if we open this, there is a bunch of stuff in here. And there should be one that says requests. Now, what are all these other things? These other things are actually dependencies of either requests or the node package manager. If you add more things, then this thing's going to grow. If you ever are uploading your project to something, don't upload the node modules unless you made a custom module, because somebody can just do npm install and it'll kind of make it all for them. So save some space. All right, so now if we want to run this, we can just do our node main.js. And when we run, we are going to see that we actually got this issue because we're referencing this streaming. Streaming is not defined. My bad. But maybe we can just kind of get rid of that and see if this works. Cool. So this is the HTML that we got back from doing our request to this, which is basically saying that we couldn't find it because, well, this is not a real thing, which, hey, makes sense. But if we do this, we should be able to get, oh, the document was moved. Google.com/. Huh. That's weird, eh? Oh, it's because we're getting a data value back, but whatever. All right, so that's JavaScript if you know Python. If you like this video, please smash the like button below because it really helps out the channel and the video, I guess. And maybe subscribe while you're down there. I try to put videos out once a week on cool and interesting things for kind of programmers of all levels, and maybe actually join the Discord too. We actually have some awesome people joining the Discord and asking questions, and a lot of awesome people helping them out. Thank you to everybody who helps out, and to all the questions, because it kind of keeps us on our toes. So thanks again. Now, remember, I'm Jake, you're awesome, and this has been JavaScript for Python developers. Cheers. Hell. Ah! Ow! Oh, my hand! Ah! God! Ah! Ah! Oh, right on the fingernail. Oh, whatever. I don't have time for this. Okay.